Okay, then why don't we just get underway as folks join? They can catch up a little. Thank you everybody for joining us on the call. It's early where I am, so I apologize in advance if I sound a little bit less focused or less pulled together than usual, but you'll all forgive me. And we're relying anyways primarily on colleagues from the Asia Pacific and MENA regions to provide us with some updates and some key sort of reflections on their part on how that final community and civil society pre-meeting for the partnership forums went. And then we'll be asking others to share reflections from the grand opening, or I think it was called a global opening of the partnership forums, I forget. But that took place yesterday. And then we really wanted to make sure that we reserved some time today to come back to the questions that we started to talk about last week in terms of, okay, so we've had these pre-meetings and now the partnership forum process is formally underway. What are some of the next steps? What are some of the actions that folks are, or actions and activities that people are planning, or ones that they would like to see us, try to do together. So that's essentially the purpose of the call. And what we'll do is we'll start with our colleagues from Asia Pacific, with Rachel and Niluka, to give us an update and sort of their reflections from that pre-meeting last week, and then turn it over to all of you, anybody else who joined those meetings, to share your reflections and just open it up for general discussion. And then we'll do the same in terms of the global opening yesterday. So I hope that sounds okay as an agenda. Feel free to use the chat. We'll try and keep an eye on it. And also just remember to keep your microphone muted while we get underway, so that we don't have to mute you and potentially miss your interventions later. So Rachel or Niluka, if I could just invite our colleagues from GFAN Asia Pacific to lead us off with some reflections from last week's final pre-meeting.
Sure, thank you so much, Katie. Good morning, a very early morning for some of you. Good afternoon and good evening to our colleagues in Asia and Pacific. My name is Rachel Ong. I'm the Regional Coordinator for Global Fund Advocates Network Asia Pacific, and I am based in Singapore. So I think a lot of the information that we had discussed, it wouldn't do justice to try to put everything that was so rich into a couple of minutes, but I will try to just give a couple of very broad headline issues. The partnership forum actually has produced from the three regional civil society pre-meetings statement, which is also available online, and I think that's also available on the GFAN website. There are some key issues in there, but some things that really specifically jumped out in Asia and Pacific would be that we still want the global fund, and the global fund that needs to remain global. This resonates really strongly with amongst the region, joined by our MENA colleagues, that do see investments prioritized in some countries over others, especially based on indicators that are not health indexes. There was also the very strong call, and I'm sure that was iterated throughout all the three civil society pre-meetings, around making sure that the Global Fund puts money where its mouth is in CRG activities. Some of the mechanisms that we can see that happen would be making sure that dual track financing is properly carried out in countries, and also seeing multi-country grants, more flexibility in implementation of some of the multi-country grants, which support the advocacy and work of national level colleagues. There was also a really, really strong call to focus and make sure that we move towards ensuring that we still maintain very highly human rights and gender equality, but not to make sure that we don't approach it in a biomedicalized approach, especially in terms of gender equality, and that's not also only focused in one specific region. There was some conversations around how we can make communities and civil society more meaningfully engaged. We do see that we do have representatives in the CCMs. However, they don't always have a strong role in decision making, to say it bluntly, and the engagement is not meaningful. And regardless of their engagement, as was said by a presenter in the opening yesterday, that the resources do not flow to communities and civil society. So there was also a huge discussion around what has been one of the key themes of discussions around the Global Fund strategy, which is its role around global health security in the MENA and Asia Pacific region. The conversation solely focused around reframing what we want to see in global health security, and rather than calling it security, we would like to see it called global health solidarity. And we laid out some very key principles that we would like to see if in that work, including justice, rights, and equity. There was also the conversation around global health solidarity and how that and how data security is something that would ensure that we do not put the lives and livelihoods of key populations at risks while data is being collected linked to global health solidarity. There was also a very brief discussions around accelerating the role of partners in supporting the implementation around rights, community rights and gender. There was also a very strong agreement that the Global Fund needs to focus on achieving its original mandate before moving into broadening its work. And there was also there were strong feelings around what the Global Fund was doing around transitioning countries, especially with COVID-19. We do see a lot of countries probably moving down the economic ladder, and what would this then imply for the Global Fund in terms of resource mobilization and how it categorizes countries accordingly. I do see a lot of other colleagues on the call from the consultation, so I'd also like to leave it to them to raise any other points that I have missed. But obviously the two other key things would be making sure that community system strengthening is invested in, including for mobilization, monitoring and advocacy, and making sure that we address the legal barriers and other policy barriers of human rights violations, discrimination and violence against key, vulnerable and marginalized communities, including women and girls. Okay, over.
Thank you, Rachel. Those are great reflections. And as someone who's able to participate in the other two pre-meetings, really consistent with what we heard in other regions. I see RD with her hand raised, so I'll turn it over to RD and just remind any other colleagues who were at that Asia Pacific MENA 2 briefing last week that if you have further reflections you want to add to Rachel and RD's, that will come to you after that, and please raise your hand. So go ahead, RD.
Hi, Katie. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rachel, for that. I'll just build upon what Rachel said. By the way, I'm R.D. Marte. I'm the Executive Director of APCASO, which hosts the Asia Pacific Communication and Coordination Platform for CRG, as well as the Activist Coalition on TV in Asia Pacific. I would jump straight away in terms of reflections as a member of Asia Pacific Communities and Civil Society vis-a-vis the output of the pre-meetings, which is the statement. So I think in general, relative to the Asia Pacific Communities and Civil Society statement, generally there are agreements and alignments in the top line messages. But what I feel and see as the losses, I do understand that that statement is global, but the regional specificities and calls that were kind of lost, but that remains in the position of the Asia Pacific statement are around one, making sure that global fund investments on gender, women, and girls reach our region. Just to call out that so far, most of the investments around this do not reach our region. That's one. Second, it has been coming out very strongly in the Asia Pacific consultations, the call for including mental health in Global Fund, in the package of Global Fund supported programs and services, whether this be provided by governments or by communities and civil society. There is an acknowledgement that there is a need to support also finding out the gaps that exist when we say, mental health interventions in the context of quality of life of key vulnerable and marginalized populations. And there is a role for Global Fund to also play in terms of supporting discussions in finding, the gaps and the best ways, because we know that we need to do work and support work on mental health, but there's exactly not enough knowledge and experiences on how to do that, and that should be part of the investments. The third that I felt was lost in the bigger, and again, I understand that not everything would appear in the global CS statement, but specific reference in terms of the Global Fund's role in supporting work around, sustainability and ensuring availability, affordability, and accessibility of life-saving medicines and diagnostics, particularly by removing intellectual property and related barriers and supporting advocacy on making sure that the full flexibilities of TRIPS are applied. So the Asia Pacific statement is very explicit around that, and we hope somehow, we would retain it in our statement. I think around, as I've said, there was a lot of resonance and alignments, including, the highlighting of the importance in continued and in fact scaled up investments on CRG and community system strengthening. The slant that the Asia Pacific region is taking is that, yes, we do agree that in terms of the strategy, there's a very high profiling of CRG and CSS, but what we want to see is also like equal attention and the prioritization in terms of budget allocation for concrete investments and CRG and CSS. So put the money where its mouth is. So just in terms of where this is taken next, I'm just saying too that I'm taking the Asia Pacific CRG and APCASO slot on behalf of the team, because at the moment there are some country consultations happening. The one that's in India, where my colleague Jen Ho, the APCRG manager, is actually resourcing. So just recognizing the diversity of the Asia Pacific region and a lot of challenges to participating in regional discussions, either it's language or, like to be able to really reach grassroots communities. APCASO as APCRG, also with contributions from GFAN Asia Pacific, are supporting further processes towards the finalization of the statement, making sure that, we do reach out at the country level. So there's going to be from now, and the first one is happening at the moment in India. We're supporting it. We gave a small grant for that to happen. Until February 17, we've opened the statement for comments. There are going to be 9 national country level consultations, which covers Bhutan, Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Mongolia, Nepal, Pakistan, PNG, Philippines, and Sri Lanka. Some of them are online, some of them are virtual. There's also going to be regional consultations on the Global Fund strategy based on the draft statement that's going to be led by the Activist Coalition on TB for the region, as well as the malaria sub-regional platform from Mekong CS platform. So all of these are envisioned to really lead into a statement on behalf of communities and civil society in the region that reflects, diverse voices. What I'm hearing, because Jen is giving me live updates from the India consultation, despite all the technical glitches, is that even before it started, like the country partners are so clear in terms of their call to the Global Fund to keep the attention to the 3 diseases. So no mission creep, that is coming out strongly, and that is also reflected in the statement. Other than that, Rachel, I think Luca has already shared the link. It's also found in APCASO's website. And I think we'll just keep everyone updated. And then we hope like you support us in some of our calls. Part of our next steps also in preparation for the partnership forum is reaching out to the different relevant delegations. So the Southeast Asia delegation to the board, the WIPRO delegation to the board. When we are able to finalize our statement, we are going to make sure that we get support in pushing for some of our statements. Of course, the communities and civil society delegations, we've reached out to RBM and to Stop TB Partnership just to get support. And also there's a lot of common ground issues, but also particular asks from the region. Thanks, Katie and everyone.
Thanks, RD. I think that's really helpful, and it's good to get live updates as the consultation is taking place. I see Robin Montgomery, I see your hand raised, and I'd just like to invite anyone who was participating in that meeting if they did have any further reflections to add to what's already been said. But over to you, Robin.
Thanks so much, Katie. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? All right, it's very early here, so I'm kind of whispering because others are sleeping in the house. But thank you so much. My name's Robin Montgomery, and I'm the board member for the Developed Country NGO delegation and the chair to the implementer group. And I did take part in both those consultations last week. And I think, you know, just based on what RD has said and what Rachel has said, you can get a sense of really how organized civil society and community is in the Asia Pacific region. It was really, really impressive. And as Katie, you were saying, there are many areas of convergence and overlap amongst all of the three civil society pre-meetings and what has come out of each of those. I'm not going to repeat anything that has already been said by RD or Rachel. I think I'm just going to ask a question to them both and to Naluka maybe, and anyone else who was there. So going into these pre-civil society meetings, we kind of had a discussion about things that we wanted to pay attention to make sure that we were holding the Global Fund and holding ourselves accountable for things like meaningful engagement and recognizing the challenges of ensuring meaningful engagement in a digital world. I'm curious in terms of the participants. So I know that there is a lot of concern around privacy and security, and those participant lists will not be released. However, you know, given the expansiveness of the Asia Pacific region, I'm curious if you were, or if anyone was a little surprised that there were 53 people on the call in day one and about 30 people on the call in day two. And so just would be really interested to hear if you've heard any feedback from the communities that you work with about any troubles accessing the platform or, you know, anything like that, just to ensure that we are holding ourselves accountable, we are being as transparent as possible, and ensuring the meaningful engagement of all communities and civil society. Thanks.
RD, I'm going to assume that that hand is raised so that you can respond to that question. So I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yeah, just in direct response, thanks for those questions, Robin. I think in terms of the selection of participants into the partnership forum from the region, as well as the consultation, we all know that that's the decision of the Global Fund Secretariat. But before that, we did organize as a region to compile together our suggestions. So APCASO took the lead as APCRG to actually try to put together a list of, you know, from different countries representing the different diseases, covering the different subregions, representing both regional and country networks. So we did put and we tried to work with the Secretariat to have as much coverage. We did follow up with the partners in terms of who were indeed able to access. Of course, we do understand that the seats are limited. In terms of the actual pre-meeting, I mean, again, like it is good that privacy issues are being considered, because we did ask for a list of the participants so that we could coordinate, strategize, caucus on the side for the pre-meeting as well as for the partnership forum. But I guess in the broader consultation, how we are going about it in terms of reaching, making sure that we're not leaving people behind, is we're not operating at a vacuum. There are actually existing structures. There are, for example, country partners who are well situated in the countries who could do the reach out. It would still not be perfect. There would always be losses. I have just an overall comment, because when we were actually preparing for the pre-meeting and prepping some of our country partners, it is a reality. Like even if it's open, even if it's online, for example, the call I think happened around this time, but for our Pacific partners, that was late evening to them. There are issues like even of connecting, like they had to stay in one office, our Pacific partners, particularly from PNG. We were even considering if we needed to, if Apcaso needed to support their transportation, you know, their data, just because these are like things that we take for granted, but for others it is, and of course these are already the privileged people who have rich, who were invited, who know that the meeting is happening. So again, this is why we're trying to actually give justice to the process and reaching out more deeply, again utilizing the existing good structures, the regional networks and the country networks that exist in the region. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, it sure did, RD. And I mean, it's very clear how consultative your process has been around and leading into the partnership fora or the pre-meeting rather, and what you intend to do, getting folks ready for the partnership fora at the beginning of March. It was more just around, again, knowing that it is driven by the Secretariat, just
Yeah.
to make sure that, just your thoughts on the numbers. I mean, it was really difficult to tell who was from the Secretariat and who was from the region, but I was just curious about that number. But again, you know, I think you might want to think about documenting it, your experience
Yeah.
as a case study, because you
Yeah.
really do reach out and you have been extremely consultative. It's been impressive.
Thank you.
Thanks both. And so I'd just like to invite anybody else who had comments or questions, and in particular, I know Robin, you had your developed country and geo board member and implementer group hat on. Just invite Andre or Carolyn or any others or Bruna, or so I'm just trying to see who else is on the call from the communities delegation. Mick, hi. If you guys had any further comments, if you attended that meeting or, you know, from the global opening yesterday. So not to put anybody on the spot, but Andrea, did you have any quick comments around the global opening or last week's final pre-meeting?
Hi, Katie. Hi, everyone. So on the global opening, right? Yeah. Well, first of all, it's great that Rico is back as chair of the strategy committee. So we all were pleased to see him, and also to see his facilitated discussion with amazing interventions. In particular, I mean intervention of Joyce. She did a very strong scene setting, both on the role of community and civil society, young people, and special channel besides just dual track financing to money not just hit the ground in the countries, but actually supporting directly communities and key populations work on implementation, but also on community-led monitoring and engagement in the oversight and governance structures in countries. So besides emphasis on young people was really great, and overall I was very glad that some focus, like Joyce said, and also some comments in the chat box also supporting her, as well as a video with mostly civil society representatives, put much more emphasis from communities and civil society during the opening than from other sectors like donors or governments. So that's really the big difference. I saw in comparison with. I participated earlier in one partnership forum. It was ICA and LAC, And at that time, actually, space for civil society and communities were smaller. So it's good. On the concerns, there was not much discussions there. We understand that that was the opening, but really this is a lesson to take forward for the partnership forums itself, how we can better organize in communicating key messages and supporting each other. So the civil society pre-meetings didn't provide the precise guidance on this. So we need to do an extra work building on the joint civil society statement with some highlights, or just agreeing the key messages among ourselves. Also, we as a board or delegation members sometimes shouldn't be forced to speak. So it should be also really other participants. So we are 100% open to support them, to share any thoughts and any suggestions we have. So that's another point, that we need to build more linkages and bridges to share our suggestions or our thoughts. Overall, the key discussion should be about not what, but how, because we are all more or less clear about what. Well, except of still a kind of ongoing discussion to what extent Global Fund should be involved in a global health security agenda, which we are not really happy both with changing the mandate, but even with the language, as we already, it was mentioned that kind of words, even using global health security as a concept of global health solidarity is much more relevant, and justice and equality. The things with vaccine distribution is terrible, but we should address it from the human rights perspective. It's not the Global Fund business to jump into vaccine huge area. So in terms of the broadening mandate of the Global Fund, I hope we all are clear that the Global Fund should keep the focus, not be the Global Fund for everything with the same amount of money. But in terms of the how, it's really critical to make some changes, not skip this very important elements, because we keep hearing, oh, it's not a strategic, it's operational, let's shift it, let's park it or shift it back. But in reality, these are strategically important operational issues for the success of the new strategy.
Okay.
Caroline, yeah.
Yeah, there's a few questions in the chat, or a little bit of discussion there around clarification on the terms that were being used, and Anne-Marie will come to you after. But Mick, you've had your hand raised and waiting patiently for a few minutes, so we'll go to you, Mick, and this is an open discussion. So for those who want to share, reflections on this or thoughts about what we should be doing together next. But I do want to make sure that we wrap up this sort of reflection, debrief kind of conversation, and move next to those kinds of ideas like what Andre was suggesting in terms of, a strong statement, strong key messages, making sure that other voices beyond sort of board members from the communities and civil society and NGO delegations are heard. So Mick, sorry to make you wait, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's a bit about what in response to what you're saying, really. First, yeah, I totally support pretty much what Andre was saying. Joyce was awesome. I have to say, she was awesome. She was by far and away, she made everybody else look amateurish in her comments. She was so on point. I felt France also gave some encouragement, in particular around the potential for a separate funding stream. So France maybe is maybe not a friend, but certainly not an enemy in these discussions. But what I mainly took from the grand opening was that, you know, Peter Sands mentioned that 38 million lives had been saved. On that basis, there isn't everything doesn't need changing. And some of it just needs modifications or perhaps some operational adjustments, but we don't need to change everything. And I think what I took from it is that, and I think it's emerging from the pre-meetings and from the consultations that we're having, that there are key issues around the Global Fund that do need changing. And most of those are around funding for communities, community leadership and involvement, human rights, gender, and of course, the whole global health security and mission creep thing. And I do honestly feel that going forward, that we need to really narrow down and not try and talk about everything, because not everything needs changing in the strategy. You can't save 38 million lives if you're getting everything wrong. So, and I think a lot of the discussion at the moment is too broad, not from us necessarily, but you know, the whole pantheon of things that we're supposed to be talking about. It's not necessary. It's not necessary for us to be effective. And I honestly believe if we focus down, and that during the partnership forum, and I take the point about we need to hear from people less experienced, shall we say, or less involved. But I do think as a communities, we need to dominate the conversations in the partnership forum and push the points that we're all aligned on to make the changes that need to be made. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Mike. I think those are helpful reflections. Carolyn, I see your hand raised, so go ahead.
Thanks, Katie, and everyone. Agree with Mick. I think we need to hone down, and I don't think we want to change the strategy broadly, but we want to be very focused on what needs to improve and what we need to put on the table as needing to be done. And we should try, working with Andre, we need to try and agree how we have to start bringing it into the conversation. So for example, when we talk about addressing the barriers, one of the best ways to address the barriers for us is through multi-country, where you're not putting the pressure on people in country to oppose their government. But we need to say, if you're addressing human rights barriers, one of the things that's really important and critical is multi-country grants with advocacy, just as an example. So yes, we need to hone down. Yes, we need to be clear that we're doing well, but we need to do better in these specific areas, and they need to be measured with these KPIs. And I think for me, the challenge of the pre-meetings was exactly the challenge that we face with the strategy and with the work of Global Fund, that the outreach to civil society stayed inside the secretariat, the invitation list stayed inside the secretariat, and didn't even get shared with the civil society who are part of this. So that can't be how we do it. If you have a platform in Asia Pacific, they have to be driving your invitations to these consultations. That's my feeling about where we need to be pressuring. It doesn't belong in the secretariat. You need to use what you have outside. That is our strength. That is also our weakness, how it's being implemented.
Thanks, Carolyn. Is it possible, I know it's not everybody can see it, but usually it's somewhere in when you open the participants list, and there's usually a raise hand function. I was just wondering if we could see a raise of hands on this call of people who are invited to one or more of the actual partnership forums and who have access to that partnership forum portal. So thumbs up or hands raised, whatever you can do just to see in terms of this group of people.
It's a reactions button, Katie, for raised hand.
Yeah, there's reactions as well. Okay, whichever way you can make it work. Okay. Sorry, I know it's not ideal in terms that it's not going to get us. I just wanted to see just in terms of, so it's about like, it looks to be about half of the participants in today's call, but that's a significant, so thank you everyone. If you want to go ahead and lower your hand, that's appreciated. So it's about half. And the reason I asked that is because one of the sort of process comments that came out of the very first partnership forum pre-meeting that I was a part of was, didn't get a sense out of those meetings at all in terms of how we would participate in the partnership forums themselves. And I was really curious about how that would work during the Global Open yesterday and the sort of technical sort of space. We could use the chat, but we couldn't see, as participants, we couldn't see who else was on the call until they commented in the chat, or if they did. So it was unclear in terms of who was in the room. And so I'm really curious in terms of, as we start thinking about how we organize together and make sure that we are talking to each other and making interventions, is how do we know who we're making interventions to? And how do we know which spaces will be open to us? And so I just wanted to get a sense, because I've been looking at that partnership forum portal and trying to understand it. And I think there is sort of a technical briefing the day before the first of them. And I think it would be useful for people who are attending, if they're able to get on that. But also I think we should be asking for more clear guidance in terms of what participation looks like. And if we're going to see who we're talking to in those topic booths and those sort of breakout rooms and those kinds of things, or how those will be operated. So next steps, everyone. So we have this really tremendous statement out of the Asia Pacific region that's currently out for consultation, and there's a number of consultations going on. Most of the other regions, or if not all of them, in terms of the CRG platforms, had extensive consultation conversations and surveys before, before the new year to lead up to this, but didn't produce, separate statements, but do have overviews that have been shared in the pre-meetings. GFAN, we've been trying to take all of that information in and synthesize that into sort of a key priorities list that you can find on our website, and we'll throw the link again into the chat for anybody who hasn't seen that. But the question is, okay, so we've all sort of made these statements, we've all sort of made these briefings. What we need next, and I heard a little bit from Andre, and I've been thinking about it, what we need next are sort of some key messages that we want to take forward. What Carolyn was saying in terms of, we need the key messages of what needs to be changed, and we need to be specific about that. And we need to be making sure that we are reflecting those regional disparities in the how to and the nitty gritty. I think it was RD who pointed out that a lot of the top line messages are similar across the regions, but sort of how that actually plays out in each region can be quite different. And then we need to think strategically, and we need to make sure that we are engaging as many people as possible in terms of conversations between all the partnerships forums that are coming up, but also in an ongoing way to board representatives who will be taking the outcomes and the conversations of the partnership forums forward into their discussions as a strategy committee, but then also at the board meeting, which I think is in May. So this is the time for some big thinking and some good ideas. I think that as GFAN, I think we've talked before on previous calls like this, that we would be working towards building a bit of like an advocacy toolkit where we would be able to share, quick key messages from these conversations, suggestions on how to reach out, and, links to reach out to the board members from your region or other sort of delegations. But this is quite a unique group in that many of us have access to the partnership forums themselves. And so I just wanted to ask the question in terms of how people feel we should best keep coordinated and organized, and keep making sure that we're bringing in the perspectives of people who aren't invited to those partnership forums, or who aren't necessarily engaging with the board. So I know RD, I think it was RD or Rachel, sorry, had outlined some plans around their statement and specific constituencies that they would be reaching out to once that statement has been made final in the middle of February. Other thoughts? Are there other sort of plans around there? And what do you think about generally trying to pull together key messages and some basic core advocacy documents, as well as sort of making sure that we're capturing regional differentiation around key issues like what Carolyn was raising in terms of, her perspective that, multi-country grants are one of the ways that is most effective to deliver community and civil society work. So I see two hands raised, Mick and Rachel. So go ahead, Mick, and then Rachel.
Thanks, Katie. It's just just to let you know, one of the things that the Global Network of Sex Work Projects have done is produce a 2-page crib sheet, which talks in part about how best for sex workers to engage, but then lists a few of the key issues that, from NSWP's perspective and sex worker perspective, they should be lobbying for. And so, I mean, it's not. I'm happy to share that as something that could be modified or built on, but it may be as a way of. So it's only two sides of A4, so it's not long, and it might just be a helpful way of going forward. That's all.
Thanks. It's always good to look at good examples, Mick. Thanks for that suggestion. If you could share in the chat, if you have a link to it, or if you could share it, that would be great. Rachel, go ahead.
Great, thanks. So we will be in the Asia Pacific. We'll be convening a regional meeting end of February for the communities and civil society members that will be attending the partnership forum. We do understand that there will be specific topics and people will be broken out into different groups. So we wanted to use that to strategize about how we would bring the key messages across into the different various topics. If people have access, and only partnership forum participants will have access to the website, you will see that there will be various topic booths set up for each of the topics. What remains really unclear is how do people get divided into the various topics. So I suppose that information will come prior to the opening of each of the regional partnership forums, and you'll be allocated according to your preference the different topic booths. So they will be held individually, and all the materials on the breakout group topics and questions are already available on the website itself.
Thank you, Rachel. Go ahead, RD.
I think Mick first, right? Or okay. Oh, okay. I'll take my turn. No, I think just in addition to that, or I mean, we'll also like a lot of the participants from the Asia Pacific region, communities and civil society list actually know each other. Like there's a lot of familiarity. We have most of the people on WhatsApp, so we'll continue. Aside from the preparatory meeting that Rachel mentioned, we are planning for any strategizing that needs bitching on the side while it's happening. We're going to do that. We'll explore all options. I think in terms of overall strategy, one, we have to be clear on our messaging. This is for the Asia Pacific region, and that's why we're wanting a statement where we'll be confident gets the support of most people from the region. We'll keep on coming back to that. But what I would find useful as part of the global civil society community is to actually identify, because I don't want them to say, like, of course, Asia Pacific will stand by its statement. What are our broader, unities that we would want to see hammered again and again in each of the regional partnership forums, so that aside from our own statement, we'll also get to be supporting that. I think there's already, as I said, top line agreements, but how do we say that? What specific language? Because there is expertise in amongst the civil society community partners attending in terms of getting things done, either by doing bilateral discussions with the government participants. We do have people who have clout in terms, even with the government participants who are anticipating who would join. It would be good. We're still waiting from the secretariat to have access to the list of the complete list of participants, but there's also restrictions, privacy restrictions to that, because it would be good so that we know who else is there. We know our people who are coming, but we don't have the full proper list of the civil society participants. So yeah, but unity, like aside from the region specific, which the regions would declare and I guess would fight for and would do their own strategies around, like what do we want to be echoed again and again and again, yeah, and push for.
That's helpful, and helpful to hear you say again about, participants, and we just keep coming back to it. Knowing who is invited and who is participating feels like one of the biggest sort of holes in all of this. But go ahead, Robin. I see your hand raised.
Thanks, Katie. So just building on that, actually, I'm wondering, and knowing that, so I had a conversation yesterday with, it was yesterday or the day before, I don't know, time seems elusive these days, but with Hannah in the Secretariat. And I understand that folks will be getting information about what breakout group they will be part of about a week before each of the partnership forums. So I'm wondering if it would be helpful to take on this, to do a mapping, essentially. So to have a Google spreadsheet where we can just input who we know is going to be going to what breakout group and when, so that we have an idea of who we can reach out to, how we can support that individual, and then also really ask those individuals to provide a briefing back to us so that we have an understanding of what the discussions were, how things could potentially be made more concise or more constructive as we go into the next series of partnership forums. So that's one. And then secondly, knowing that, I mean, we are going to be talking again about those 3 big bucket issues, but we're also supposed to be talking about some of the other key instruments for the strategy, like STC, like financing, like comorbidities and adjacent health issues. It would be to do a crib sheet for each of those issues so that the folks who are in those breakout groups are able to get more granular on those specific issues and really lead the discussions. So just those 2 ideas, the mapping and crib sheets per breakout group topic. Thanks.
Thanks, Robin. Any other thoughts? I don't want to put anybody sort of on, oh my gosh, I don't even remember the word. Sorry, it's before 7 in the morning my time and I don't remember the word. So I'm just going to go back to folks. Yeah, thanks. So speaking of putting people on the spot, no, I'm just kidding, actually. I'm going to go to Rosemary and then Carolyn and back to you, RT. So, because I see a few hands raised. So Rosemary.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everyone. And great job to our colleagues in AP. So for GFAN Africa, we have a regional meeting tomorrow. It's a meeting to bring together civil society and communities to have a conversation on what has happened. A lot of it is going to be updates from the pre-meetings. We are very conscious that not many colleagues are able to be here at this global call. So we're going to have a regional call tomorrow. But also it's a moment to share updates on like what the next steps are in terms of planning for the regional partnership forums and what colleagues could expect. We will utilize that call tomorrow to also try to get and see how many of our colleagues in the region are going to be attending the partnership forum. It's going to help with the strategy, with the just coming together and see how we caucus outside of the meeting, during the meeting, and just to be sure how we can come together. It's also a platform for us to basically ensure that colleagues in the region are very much well informed and updated. In terms of the messaging and the structure, we totally agree with the priorities. Also, quite a number of the priorities identified in the AP statement also apply to the region. The statement that came out of the regional meetings, you know, all these statements from civil society and communities. And so we want to be sure and just to strategize and caucus and see who has been invited from the region. So for colleagues who are here from the region and would like to attend tomorrow's strategy meeting, we'll put in the chat the login details, the time of the meeting, etc., etc. And even if you're not from the region and you'd like to attend that meeting, kindly, you are welcome to do that. Thank you.
Sorry, I lost my cursor. Go ahead, Carolyn, then RD, and then back to Rachel.
Yes, I got invited as an observer, or at least our board had an opportunity, our board member and alternate had an opportunity to select one person to go to the meeting and one to observe. I'm not clear on the parameters of that. I will find out from the secretary what does that mean to be an observer, but I'm actually going to be observing the Asia Pacific and MENA too. So just letting colleagues in that region know that I'll be there as an observer. I already know what groups I'll be in. They've already told me on my portal, but happy to caucus with you and I will be there.
Awesome, thank you, Caroline.
RD?
Yeah, just a few things, just drawing some parallels on how things happen when there's how do you call this, country consultations in the development of global funding requests. Usually for accountability, if there are civil society community perspectives, then it has to be explicitly tabled, that has to be documented, so that, you know, as part of transparency and really listening to the voices, if they don't get taken account into the final, you know, funding proposal, then there's an issue with that funding proposal because it didn't listen to civil society. As far as the partnership forum goes, like you could hammer and hammer messages, but what is our process for at the end of it if we don't get our, you know, like what we ask versus what we will get versus what Global Fund says is the legitimate space for communities and civil society to do shape the discussion. So that is my question. Second, also because there are separate regional partnership forums, what would be the thread that connects these three in terms of, again, monitoring, you know, alert system, for example, something good or crappy, you know, like an indication from one forum to another, because I don't know if there's any constituency or anybody from our group who actually has the capacity to sit and observe in all three. So that's one, it would be good to actually have like a monitor. I have a third point, which is not the third point in the Asia Pacific and MENA pre-meeting, as well as in our own, the APCASO, APCRG, and GFAN AP led process of consultation. You cannot, I mean, we know that we are talking about the next strategy of the Global Fund. The discussion on one level needs to be kept at that strategic level, but we cannot prevent, we cannot delineate the strategy discussions with the discussion of the operational barriers, as we all know. At the same time, like what is the, I mean, I've asked this during the pre-meeting, because for example, the statement from Asia Pacific focuses more on the strategic asks, while it does raise that it does need to address barriers. However, there are other existing publications from the Asia Pacific region, from APCRG and from APCASO, for example, that already consulted on operational bottlenecks that communities and civil society are experiencing on Global Fund grants, making them ineffective, and already offering recommendations. This happened like 1 year ago, 2 years ago, also on the role of Global Fund in COVID, and also recognition of the role of communities and civil society that again has specific recommendations. We cannot put them all in the statement, but there should be like a formal process for this to be registered as submissions, you know, because you have the strategy, but you also need to work on operational bottlenecks. But, you know, like for that to be registered and a response from the Global Fund Secretariat that this will be considered in some of the process, either in the KPI development, etc., they would actually be formally responded to.
Yeah, so Rachel, go ahead. And then,
I'll be very brief about this, but you can actually see who is attending the partnership forums if they've registered on the website. The thing would be that you can't see the email addresses and you cannot see for which ones they're participating in. But that is, so if you have access to the portal, you go to schedule appointment and then you go to one-to-one and add attendees and the whole list appears. Again, you can't see the email addresses, but you can see where they're from and which organization the person is from.
Nice.
Not sure it's helpful. Okay, but
that is
good
no,
luck,
that's
guys.
a good, no, that's a good steer. What do you mean, good luck, guys? Where are you going?
I'm not going to put that list together, that's for sure.
No, I understand. No, I'm just teasing you. Okay, so I'm not seeing RD. Is that okay? No, residual. Okay. So I think there's a lot of sort of great ideas here. One thing that I did sort of note and sent a message to Hannah and Harley yesterday was that there weren't really any in the pre-read documents. There weren't really any of ours. There were none of the community and civil society resources that we've been sharing and those kinds of things. And so I sent them a list of some of them and they have agreed, like I woke up to an email before this call that they will be adding some of those. So my suggestion would be the more of those kinds of resources that you would like to see, to just make the request specifically of Hannah. But I did sort of throw in a few, but that again is sort of, I believe, either only available in the portal or only available on the, I'll have to just double check where they've put it. But I just had that email before the start of this call. So, but they hadn't really had anything there other than that statement that had been made out of those pre-meetings. So I think that we now have some kind of a sneaky way to see who's registered and keep an eye on that in terms of those one-to-one meetings, which I'd seen but not gone into. So that's really helpful, Rachel. And then we also know that people will be divided out into breakout groups. There are resource papers and background papers there, but as far as I know right now, there aren't participants lists, but there may be once we're all informed of those, because I feel like some of us know and some of us are not 100% sure yet. There's some mapping that's been suggested that could go on, and I'm happy to do something that can be a bit of a crowdsourced kind of mapping, but I'm also not going to be taking on trying to map every participant to all 3 of the partnership forums on my own. But if people find that useful, then we can, absolutely, set that up and try and encourage people through different channels to do that. Mick has shared a resource, just a quick kind of brief. We know that we have these regional statements, but we want something that's a bit more global that allows for those regional differentiation, but keeps us to those top key messages and some kind of early alert system or some kind of alert system in between those partnership forums. I think these calls are helpful, but they also don't necessarily capture everyone in terms of availability, and they are often maybe not as concise as they can be. So we'll see, put our heads together and see if there's some combination of offering calls, but then also offering some kind of I can't even think of what it could be, but we'll put our heads to it. If people have good ideas about, oh good, the kids are awake. If we put our heads to what that could look like and what kind of green light, red light, yellow light kind of system we might want to come up with, we can certainly sort of facilitate that. Anne-Marie, I'm seeing your hand raised. So if I could turn to you for a question, but ultimately I think where we're at here in the closing minutes is that we've got a bunch of we've got a lot to do to try and keep organized, especially because we won't literally be in hallways together and literally won't be seeing each other. So we've got to think of some ways that we can keep these conversations going and keep each other informed of sort of the issues that are being raised, and especially those things that are like major red flags or majorly problematic. So Anne-Marie, your hand's raised, so go to you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, agreed. And just say thank you very much for all the information that has been shared. A quick question. Do we know, is all the information that has gone up on the Partnership Forum portal now, does that include all the pre-reads that will be available before the Partnership Forums? Or are there still some to come? Because I know there was a little bit of uncertainty about what would be coming and when. And I guess linked to that is I think the importance of this proactive outreach where we think there is synergies or issues where it's helpful, and really helpful to hear what AP colleagues are planning to do, because I think that proactive outreach is going to be so important, particularly given the the wealth and the challenging timeline of kind of documentation that is available ahead of those partnership forums, just trying to get some of those key messages into digestible formats and kind of proactively out to those we think would be helpful is obviously going to be key. So thanks for the coordination on that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's helpful. I mean, there is now a wealth of information, but whether it's the complete set of information, just like in Sweden, or if there's a date by which we will have that complete set of information is a good question to ask and try and understand that. Robin, you had your hand raised.
Thanks, Katie. Just quickly, knowing that we're at time, but just wanted to let folks know as well, wearing the chair of the implementer group hat. So I've put in the chat there that we are attempting to do even a very high level mapping of the different, who's going from the different constituencies to what partnership forum and what breakout group, etc. But also wanting to make sure that all implementer group constituencies have access to the same amount of information coming from our different colleagues across different sectors. So I have a Dropbox created for implementer group constituencies where I am putting different statements that have been released. So if you do have some statements and you would like them to be shared with the broad implementer group of government and non-government constituencies, please do send them to me and I will make sure that they are addressed within the implementer group, shared. And then if you feel it would be helpful, please do reach out to your respective board members in your region because they will have access to your statements. And I'm sure you will be sending them your statements, but to really lobby them for around your issues as well. So I'll put my email here in the chat and do encourage folks just to send me whatever they would like to share with the broader implementer group of the board. And I'm happy to do that.
Thanks, Robin. That's helpful. And I'll just pass it back to Tara for some quick wrap up reminders here. An hour is never enough with all of you lovely people, but just keep your eye out over the GFAN listserv and sort of our website and social media. We'll just keep trying to keep everybody up to date and plan other conversations or other spaces like Google Docs and those kinds of things where we can keep the conversation going over the next essentially 5 weeks as these partnership forums take place. Tara?
Thanks, Katie. So just want to thank everyone for joining the call today. And just to let folks know that I have popped into the chat a link to our strategy development, and I will be posting the call notes up and a recording of the call up on our website shortly, along with all of the links that were shared today. So if you've missed something in the chat, it will be available. We do have a few upcoming GFAN calls. Did you know that not just the Global Fund has a strategy, GFAN's got its strategy, and we've been working hard away on it, and it's actually almost ready to go, and we're hoping to release it in early March. So we'll be inviting you to a call to discuss that, and I have sent an email to everyone asking for your reflections on what GFAN means to you. So I hope that you will take a moment to record a short little video of what GFAN means to you to help make our strategy a little bit special when we do share it with all of you. We also will be releasing some World TB Day stuff, and also, we are very much looking forward to introducing all of our new speakers to you. So that is also coming down the pipe. We've got lots of things coming up, and we look forward to sharing it all with you soon. I am so pleased to be able to say all of those things because we've been working hard on them for many, many months. So thank you, and have a lovely rest of your day or evening, and we will talk with all of you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your days.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Talk to you soon.
Guys.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.